It's October, which means it's time for some Halloween scroll sawing, and I'm planning on doing this really cool picture. It's 4 different jack-o'-lanterns all stacked on top of each other. Now, what I like about this is there's not a whole lot of pieces, but it still has a big impact because of those faces. Really expressive. Also, I'm not really seeing a whole lot of colors here. Maybe 3, 4, 5? 4, 5? We'll play it by ear. Now, here is what I'm picturing. We're gonna take this picture and we are going to cut it out of a piece of walnut. Now, this is just a really thin walnut panel. I took 2 walnut boards and glued them together, and then after the glue was dry, sanded it down. Super thin, like 1/16 of an inch thin. It's very, very thin. So I'm gonna stick this on my walnut panel and then cut out a silhouette. Then take that and glue it onto another panel. This is a piece of 1/2 inch thick MDF. And what I did earlier was I glued on some wenge veneer on the front and some cherry veneer on the back side of that. Now, the whole point in that is it gives me a solid surface to put all of my artwork on there, but also that wenge is gonna be the dark shadow of my picture. It's gonna make all the other pieces really pop. But first, I gotta cut out my actual picture itself out of the walnut. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take my picture, I'm gonna trim it down to a manageable size. And I'm gonna put some contact paper down on my walnut panel. That's really gonna help out with the cleanup work later on. I'm gonna take some spray adhesive, spray it on the backside of my picture, and then put it on top of that contact paper. Great thing about this is whenever I'm all done, I could just peel the contact paper off. It doesn't leave any sort of glue residue on my board. Now, once that's all in place, I'm gonna cover the entire thing in packing tape. That's just to help prevent it so that the template doesn't fray up. I know some people say that it helps with lubricating the blade. I've never encountered that. Actually, I've seen the opposite, where now it has sticky residue on my blade, but it does help with the template fraying, so I'm gonna do that. I'll probably tackle this with a couple different blades. I'm gonna use probably a number 5 reverse tooth blade. That's just a really good all-purpose blade. If there's any tight spaces or curves, then I'll probably go down to a number 3 or a number 2 crown tooth blade. I really like these. They're not as easy on straight cuts, but they are fantastic on all those curves, those tight areas, and they give a super clean cut. So I'm a big fan of a crown tooth blade. Essentially, I'm just gonna cut out the outside shape of my artwork. I need to keep the background, but cut through the pumpkin. So all the pumpkin stuff can get all thrown away. I don't care about any of that. We're gonna cut out the actual artwork using different wood species. I'm gonna try to stay right on the outside of those black lines. I don't wanna go too far over into the white area, because whenever we're putting all the pieces together, I'm gonna use those black areas to register all my pieces, make sure they go where they're supposed to go. It'll all make sense a little bit later on. Silhouette's cut out, looks pretty good. Now I'm gonna glue it onto my panel. Just got some regular wood glue and I've got a little roller here. This thing is really handy. I'll put a link down in the description to where I got this from, but it's really, really helpful for something like this. So apply glue to it, stick it on the panel, stick it into my veneer press, squish this thing down, let it sit for a while. And while it's sitting there, I can start working on what are the colors we're gonna use for actually cutting out the pieces. So if we pull up the artwork, we can see that mainly we need orange, which makes sense, it's jack-o'-lantern. So for the orange, I'm thinking hedge apple. That would be a really good one. It's also called orange wood. So, you know, obviously it's perfect for this. Then you've got that color in the mouth and the eyes. It looks like it's a little bit offset. That one may be a mahogany or sapele. That might be good. You just want something that's a little bit reddish, orangish tint. For the stem, I'm gonna use lignum vitae. It's one of the only green woods in the world. And then you've got all the black, inside the mouth, inside the eyes. Well, that's what the wenge is for. I'm gonna start by cutting out all those pumpkins. So I've got my piece of hedge apple. This is not very thick, but it's much thicker than whatever the walnut panel is. I'm thinking maybe 3/16 of an inch. You notice I don't really measure a whole lot. I just go by eye, because I mean, what's the point in adding math to it if I don't have to? So I cut out just a piece of my template here. I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. Contact paper, take some spray adhesive, stick my picture on that, cover it in packing tape, and then start cutting. I'm really gonna cut these out twice. I'm gonna cut on the outside of my black line, then I'm gonna come back and then cut on the inside of the black line. The whole point that is I want to save the black line. That is the shadow line. That's what's gonna help me to register all my pieces. So if I don't save that, well then I'm kind of guessing as to where the pieces are actually gonna go on the panel. I'm using a combination of wood glue and CA glue or super glue. I used wood glue on all the bigger pieces, and then I also add a little bit of CA glue to that so that it sticks faster. I don't have to worry about clamping it in place. And then for the smaller pieces, I'll just use straight up CA glue. And when I need to, I'll also spray some accelerator on it to make it dry even faster. Hedge apple is a really dense wood, much, much denser than even hard maple, but it doesn't really cut too bad. I cut a lot of this with a number 3, actually went down to a number 2 in certain spots, a crown tooth blade. And I didn't really have much of an issue as long as I took it slow. It is a little bit oily, so it can gum up blades, but if I switch them out quite often, not a big deal. Jack-o'-lanterns are looking great. Now I got to do the inside parts of their faces. So like in the eyes and the mouth, there's a darker color there, and that's what gives it that recessed look. Well, originally I've talked about doing sapele or mahogany for that, but instead I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go with Concalo alves, which is also called tigerwood, and it's easier for me to say. It's called tigerwood because usually it has like an orangish color, but it also has black stripes in it. Well, I made sure I got some pieces that did not have the black because I just like the color orange. My piece is a little bit lighter, but that's because I just recently sanded it. If you just give it time, let some sunlight get to it, it gets a little bit darker. I have a darker piece here, and you can see that's the color that I'm looking for. You'll notice that I kept the eyes and the mouth whole. I didn't cut through any of the white parts for that, and that's because I'm going to use those as templates or guides for me to make sure that my pieces go where they're supposed to go. For instance, I could take a mouth and just cut out the white area. I want to keep the black. I don't want to do anything with that. I cut out my piece out of tigerwood, put the mouth back in place. Then I take the tigerwood and glue it into the spot that I just cut out. And I'm going to repeat this over and over and over again. Based on what I'm seeing here, probably about a couple dozen little pieces. And each one of them is going to get cut twice. Again, cut the actual offcut and then cut the real piece. When I'm dealing with small pieces like this, the trick is I use a little piece of MDF. So I've got this 1/4 inch thick piece of MDF that I just cut a little slit into. So I'll stick that onto my workspace, and whenever I turn on my shop vac for the dust collection, it just stays where it's supposed to be at. Sometimes I'll tape it in place, but really what that does is it gives me a zero clearance insert. So now I can cut super tiny spots. I don't have to worry about them falling into some void where the saw blade is. I have a stable work area. Overall, it's a pretty good technique. Only downside is, well, it affects the dust collection, so, you know, it's not perfect. I really like lignum vitae. It's one of my favorite woods to work with. It's super, super dense, really oily, but very beautiful. Now, in this case, we're not using a whole lot of it because it's just these couple of the stems, but it's always good to be able to use some of it. After all that work, it is time to finally apply finish. Now, I was gonna go with a lacquer on this, but I decided I'm gonna go with teak oil instead. That's because whenever I apply it to wood, it seems to make it more saturated. I think that's gonna be cool with the colors that we have in this artwork. So, you know, my teak oil, I've got a cup, I got a little brush. Basically, I'm just gonna soak this entire thing and then let it sit for a bit. Come back, apply even more soakage, let it sit, then wipe everything off, and then let it dry overnight. This is a foolproof finish. You don't really have to do a whole lot with this besides apply it, wipe it off, and let it sit. Which kind of means it's the perfect finish for me. That turned out pretty okay. Plus I got to use some of my favorite wood species. So all in all, great project. I made a quick little picture frame out of cherry. I think that complements the artwork pretty well. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and to meet again, get in your shop and build something awesome.